So, hi, Dr. Henry, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, Janelle. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. On behalf of Cal Poly Pomona, I'd like to again welcome you and thank you for your work. We are delighted to have you as our featured speaker for the Golden Leaves Author Awards during National Library Week with the theme of Ready, Set, Library. And I know that libraries hold a special place in your heart, and we'll get to that in just a bit. Um, Having grown up in Los Angeles since the age of 3, it's really exciting to have the opportunity, honestly, to speak with you, to learn more about your journey, and to have that be shared with others. You really have decades of experience in public health, as well as deep expertise in community engagement, asset mapping, needs assessment, strategic planning, health promotion, and disease prevention across a variety of settings, including hospitals and healthcare, nonprofit agencies, government agencies, schools, and
Yeah.
faith-based organizations. I mean, your receipts are there. And we're giving you your flowers today. Coming into this conversation, again, I was just really struck in terms of, all of the different roles and responsibilities that you've held. I learned that you have served as a senior health scientist and implementation research coordinator for the Veterans Health Administration and was a senior behavioral health scientist for Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, an adjunct professor at USC School of Policy, Planning and Development, as well as an instructor with the UCLA Health Education Extension Program. Um, that
You
your
looked
history.
at my resume.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I did. Coming into this discussion. So even as I think about, you being a Cal Poly Pomona alum with your bachelor's in political science and having your academic upbringing, if you will, at the master's level, the doctoral level, specifically in public health. It is just a pleasure to be able to spend time in conversation and to connect with you on today. So, with this beautiful tapestry of experiences, if you can please share with us what motivated you to become an author.
Well, first, I'd like to just say thank you for welcoming me to Cal Poly. It means a lot to me to be welcomed back to my university, a place where it provided a significant foundation for me for moving forward. And then even more so during Library Week. Libraries have been a very important part of my life. It was an important part of my experience at Cal Poly Pomona and at the other locations that I've pursued education in. So I appreciate the timing of it, and I appreciate the invitation. And also, 6 is my lucky number. Six is a lucky number for me. So, we were when I was at Cal Poly, we were in Building 5, not Building 6. Things have changed now, but 6 is my number for me. So I appreciate that in the background. Um, yes, I've done a lot. The Cal Poly being a learn by doing institution, the Cal States being learned by doing means that you can gain practical experience across a broad variety of scientific and educational pursuits. While I was at Cal Poly, I took advantage of that. I took a long time finding out exactly what I liked. And then later in my career, each one of those experiences, the all the math courses that I took when people said you're not a math major, all the statistics courses that people said when you're not a science major, all the stuff that I was doing ended up being bits of a puzzle that came together later as a professional in my master's degree and then on in my doctorate and in my professional career. I'm happy to be here. As far as what motivated me to write the books, I love stories. I grew up, my family tells stories, we share stories, we tell about the hare and the tortoise and every little kind of story and every little Bible story and stories from other cultures. We love stories, and stories were a way that my family used to teach us ways of behaving, ways of thinking, ways of being, ways of achieving were done through storytelling. So I just love hearing stories. My mama put us to bed with a story every single night and a book. If we didn't get a story, me and my little sister, we were not ready to go to bed. You know what I mean? So I was, and then because of that, we were encouraged to make up stories when we would go. It's okay. What do you think? What do you think the tortoise should have did? Do you think the hare should have did? What if we write an alternative story? So we would write little alternative stories. And then my big sister, who was my teacher, babysitter, 6.5 years older than me, your next older sibling who knows everything when you can't talk, loved to read and loved to play school. So I was her student, when she would go, and I would pay attention to my sister. She liked to do crafting. We would take cardboard, or we would take the bag, the grocery bag, and we would cut it up and put it around cardboard, and we would draw a book cover thing, and we would make some pictures, and we would punch a hole in it, and we would, y'all remember, people remember when you did this in school, and then you would take a little piece of string and do the thing and do books. Well, I was an author when I was a kid. I was writing books when I was a young kid. I would go to the library, get as many books as they would let me get on a subject. If it was 16 books, I would carry as many books as I could. And I would go and I would imbibe those books. I would imbibe them. And then, fortunately, my mother, who at the time was not a teacher, but became a teacher and later principal and educator, but at the time she was a stay-at-home mom, she would listen to, if I wanted to tell my stories, she was a patient listener while I told her my latest discovery of whatever it was that I discovered. And so she encouraged me, oh, that's nice, little Randy. Oh, Randy, that's nice. One day you're going to do this and one day you're going to do that. And she would encourage me. And so, in school, then I became the kid who would write the reports and do the thing and lead the thing. And, I became good at book reports and writing. So I was kind of an author already. I knew I was good at it because I was acing my English and stuff all the way through without kind of really. It was a subject that came natural to me. So that's what motivated me. And then my family it would be one or two things. Oh, you're gonna write books one day. That's what the family would say. You're gonna be writing books one day, because they would see me read all the books. Or people would say, when you gonna write that book? It's two different inflections. One is you're gonna do it, then the other one, the people are impatient that you haven't written the books. But that's where the motivation started off, with the love of stories.
Thank you for that. That is, it's beautiful. And so much of what you said, it is resonating and I'm just taking notes as you're talking as well, because, in your response and through your response, you're, for me, this is my framing, that you're really, espousing, the importance of and the power of storytelling and the familial kind of upbringing and rootedness in terms of that impact on you, the expectations, and even trying on the identity from such a young age in terms of what it means to be an author. I love that. It feels like it makes it very accessible in terms of, from your sister to you kind of, standing in a kid's identity and saying, hey, I'm writing book reports. You were already kind of, developing that identity from a very early age. And I appreciated your framing in terms of how you connected all of those intimate pieces to bring you to where you are now. Um, and and so I want to talk about something else that you mentioned in terms of really kind of going to the libraries, checking out all the books that you can. I'm kind of getting a visual here. If you could talk a little bit more about, what role did libraries play in your research as a student, as a public health professional, and now as an author?
Well, thank you. I really like this question. I just loved libraries when I would go, and I remember it's far, far back in my memory, but I do remember a librarian taking me over to the card box and showing me. I'd already knew how to go up and down the aisles, and I would just wander up and down the aisles. But I remember when the librarian showed me the key to the library, which was the Dewey Decimal System, the Dewey card system, right? So, and I remember I was like, oh, there's a system to how thing goes, and um, and that was significant. I was like, oh, I could understand everything that's in the library. I don't have to wander around the aisles. I can just go to the card thing and I can flip through and look and find my topic areas and then pick the number and I could go to it. I remember that. That was a fundamental library experience. And then in school, when we would go, there was no subject that was in the library that people, whatever it was a good subject. If it was in the library, it automatically, even if that wasn't your friend's interest, and there would be, my interest would go off and I would be on tangents. I would read one thing and then there would be something that would send me off on a tangent and I would go and there was an aspect of me that was like nerdy factoid or whatever the part that became a scientist. You grown up trying to be cool, but you're a nerdy kid who likes factoids and you like to read all this kind of nerdy books or whatever. And so the library was a place where my interest, I was an athlete, but I also liked learning, and I wanted to go and that was a place nobody, uh, it, I was accepted in there for whatever subject I wanted to read about or anything. If I wanted to just read Shakespearean sonnets for whatever reason, for my ninth grade English class, you have to go in and you feel kind of embarrassed. Can you show me where the Shakespearean sonnets are? The person doesn't laugh at you and say, what are you reading Shakespearean sonnets for? They tell you where to go to find the Shakespearean sonnets and to understand them, and they accept that. And I just always found that, wow, libraries are a place where all of your ideas, and I hope this continues to be this way, that the ideas of human experience are a place where they can be shared, discussed, read, and learned from. And I found libraries to be that place, of thought freedom, and that you weren't a color in a library necessarily. Like when you would walk around and sometimes you're an athletic Black kid or whatever. You're this and that. But when you would get in the library, it's a place of the mind, and I would find that very refreshing to just be a human with a brain that thought, and I could engage with other humans, even if it was just through books, who were very, very different from me, but I could read their thoughts and imbibe that, and in a way, have a conversation with them. And it made me think about it's the commonality of it's a very human place, the libraries. I hope this is making sense. Like it was a place where I just felt like I'm a human in here, and these are humans' ideas, and I could contribute my human idea to the rest of this human idea, and I'm not all of the labels that people put on me, which are sometimes feel limiting to me. But this is a place that if my ideas can stand in the world, then they stand, and I somehow gain a sense of humanity through that. So that's what libraries did for me. And I would always see that then the generations can speak to you. The somebody from 10,000 years ago. This is why when I went to Egypt, I was like, they're talking to me through this words, and some of it was simple. We caught 3 crocodile and we bagged up some grain on the thing, but I knew something about their life. That's anthropology. They told me about their life, and so I was like, I could. I like writing about what is. I'm a public health person. I write reports, and I was like, that's worthy of librarianship. You know what I mean? And so all that became a part of it. So libraries just were a place where it really opened my mind up. It was a place where even though like I was one kid, sometimes I was the only Black kid in some classes when we moved out of Los Angeles, that I wasn't a Black kid. I was a kid who was interested in satellites or whatever. And the librarian would help me, and nobody would, there wasn't, it was a safe, they were safe spaces for me. I didn't, and I'm glad that I didn't experience play where it felt unsafe in any kind of way for me. I see you nodding. I hope that resonates with you. I don't know. Can you relate to that?
It's definitely, resonating. And, thank you so much, first off, for, just the response that, you know, while I was not there with you, I can also picture a felt experience through your experience, in that libraries can serve as a great facilitator of student success. And even though people can cognitively say that, being able to experience that and live that through is something very different. So I'm nodding because I'm just like, yes. Immediately it's taking me back to, for me, much later, when I used to go to the library when I was working on graduate degree and degrees and my doctoral degrees. And my sister scholar was a major advisor, and she's like, Janelle, you got to go get in those stats. I'm like, what? And I'm just like, no, no. But being able to kind of feel the text, just kind of be in the space. And when you talked about libraries just being safe spaces, I really kind of think about also language that, you know, around equity and inclusion and social justice that's brave spaces. Like I didn't feel so awkward going in as a younger Black, you know, female on a predominantly white campus where I'm going in to, just kind of be with this information and sit down on the floors sometimes and just kind of feel so completely comfortable and free, liberated, right? So I'm nodding because all of what you're saying is making sense, and it's taking me right back to experiences that I had and the role that libraries played in my academic upbringing and my career trajectory. I also, just want to say, and I'm looking at my notes here, just, based on what you were sharing, um, I just kind of had a aha moment, and just kind of thinking through the centralized place that libraries have in institutions of higher education, in communities, and facilitating access. And that's so completely powerful in terms of what you're sharing. So absolutely everything is resonating, and I'm nodding and I'm smiling because it's hitting at a deep level. So I appreciate you, you know, just kind of going into all of those spaces here with me today, as we just kind of talk more about, where you've been. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about your educational and career trajectories, specific to, okay, you being at Cal Poly Pomona as a political science undergraduate, to your master's and your doctoral academic journeys at UCLA, specifically in public health. And then later in life, right now, to an author on LA communities and histories. And, as I think about that trajectory, and as I invite you to think about that trajectory, just what would you like educators to know about how Cal Poly Pomona impacted you as someone who is committed to lifelong learning?
Well, Cal Poly Pomona had a significant impact on me. I mean, for one, they accepted me despite what appeared to be some gaps in my educational experience. I attended 4 high schools. I moved around, and so different lessons that started in one school, they didn't finish it at the other school. I had some gaps there. I had some family challenges and financial challenges, and when I went through high school. I graduated. I was a smart kid and was able to get through and get the things, but I did not have the sort of resources and foundation to move forward. But after a few years of working and in the school of hard knocks, I just decided, I'm just going to apply to Cal Poly. I had some relationship with Cal Poly before through familial ties, but my experience had been different than my brother's. And I applied to Cal Poly, sent my thing. Didn't have any train, my high school, whatever it was, and I got a provisional admission on probation for 2 academic quarters to be fully accepted as a student. Nobody else, no one else accepted me. That was significant, right? They took a chance on me. Then when I got there, I wasn't, there were things that, I hadn't been studying, I've been working and doing what young people do. I was 18. I was like, I think I was right before my 21st birthday. So 18 to 20, young, you got a job, I'm doing all the stuff young people do, and it's not studying, was not most of it. So when I got there, I had bad study habits. I was working, too much and just all the things. But there were people there that I did mention. Dr. Williams at the time, he was the head of the African American Studies group. There was Bert Hammond, and there was a guy named Dr. Bruce Gruby. At the time, he was in the School of Arts or whatever, Building 5 thing. And later on, he became an administrator. But when he was there, he was a young guy. He's kind of like coming off the hippie age still. And there was a few guys that were like, hey, tell me about you. They would hear me in class, tell me about yourself. And they would tell me about yourself. And then what do they just would ask me, maybe I was interested in them. Sometimes I was the only Black person in the class, and maybe they were interested in me in one way or another. How did you get here? Who are you? How did you get here? And then they encouraged me that, to sum it up, that, you have the tools to be successful in this academic world, but there seem to be some gaps in your foundation, basically. And that here's some things that if you want to pursue this, that you might want to think about trying these things. Go down and learn how to study. Go back and get some foundational math classes, whatever you missed in high school that's preventing you. They were like, we could see you're a really intelligent dude, but there's some gaps, or you just don't know what to do. You didn't get it. They figured out that there was something that I wasn't dumb. I was a smart guy, in fact, capable of acing out all the classes. But if you're missing knowledge, you can't do it because you get to that point and then you're just like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I don't know what a chi-square is. I don't know what a regression analysis is. I don't know what a coefficient is. I never even heard of that, But if you show me what to do, I can go on and I can be an epidemiologist for the county. I could be a senior health scientist for the federal government running national programs, whatever I do. But they believed in me and they said, here's what you need to do. Here's some steps that you can take to become that person that you're here. And we know that you're here for a reason. And then once they asked me, how did you get here? And I was like, my story ain't been easy. And I would tell them, and they were then once I got to Burt Hammond helped me to learn the things that I needed to do and to unlearn some of the stuff. I had some unlearning that I needed to do because I had, whatever life had brought me into some things that I needed to unlearn as well. Once I did those things at Cal Poly, I went from getting B minuses and barely doing things to where I was acing things. And then I aced out my classes. My last 2.5 years, I aced out. I was either A plus, I was setting the curve. You know what I mean? Like when they would come in, people be talking about, oh, what grades you get? It was like, y'all know I set the curve. So don't even worry about it. Yours is going to be less than mine. I would get arrogant about it, but that was my mindset to be an athlete in the classroom. I was like, you know how to be an athlete in the classroom. Get your mind right, and once your mind is right and your focus, dude, you can be, go out and be. Don't take no prisoners. Whatever. I'm watch a lot of movies, but the people at Cal Poly, they were ones who, once they saw that I could do it, they were like, there are resources for a guy like you. We got stuff for a guy who's highly motivated and who's working that hard. There's a big world out there for you, man. And then once I understood that, I worked hard, and then they also told me at Cal Poly, and this relates to the lifelong learning, is that you take your time to be well prepared for your future, that there's no rush, that when you get there, you want to be prepared so that you can, with confidence, lead those programs. You know what I mean? Like, so when I got to the master's degree program, because I was so well prepared at Cal Poly, because I had went back and taken every single math class, that when it came up to getting at UCLA, and there was like some statistic class, it was the same like at Cal Poly. Y'all know I'm gonna be the A, and whoever else want to get an A with me, y'all come on and get in my study group, and y'all can get an A too, and we can all get A's together. Otherwise, you in the B group, and because we're trying to get. I'm trying to go on to get this doctor. I'm trying to get this master's paid for. I'm trying to get this doctorate paid for. And from the foundation at Cal Poly Pomona, that the excellence that people showed me, that Randy, Cal Poly Pomona is a university just like any other accredited university in this United States. And if you do well here, you've done well in a prestigious accredited university. You don't have to feel second string or second class to anybody. And once I understood that, next thing I know, my master's degree at UCLA, I owed money at Cal Poly Pomona. They paid for my master's degree and my doctorate at UCLA. Now go figure that. I was still paying for some of my undergrad loans while I was getting my master's degree paid for at a UC from, and I owed the CSU money. But anyway, that's what Cal Poly did for me. And that's real. And that's the type of impact. And now I sit here in my house, my children graduated and all the stuff, and those lessons that some professor there took the time to see the student who had some gaps and not, and to step in and try to intervene and just say, hey, bro, you might do better if you did this, instead of not saying any. They didn't have to say that. They could have just let me go on and let me get the B minus and go it on through and somehow not reach the altitude that I was capable of reach had I had the support and help. But those three people, along with numerous other unnamed people, especially the people that be up in the main office that would give out those emergency loans every quarter, those are those really, really helped.
Thank you so much for speaking to that, and shout out to the educators. You said Burt Hammond and Dr. Bruce. What was the last?
Bruce Ruby and Dr. Williams.
Dr.
I think Yeah.
Shout out to educators, and you mentioned the numerous other folks, faculty, staff that really, took the time to see you, to see your brilliance, to see your excellence, to see, potential. And it really is, all of what you shared is really an embodiment of what the university strives to manifest in terms of its identity, in terms of, really helping anyone who dreams of success achieve it. And so when you mentioned about, they could have said nothing, because silence is powerful too. They could have just said, well, Randy, you go ahead and do your thing, and whatever grade you get, you get. But they took the time to, circle back and be like, hey, if there are, opportunities for you to strengthen your foundation, you catapulting into a whole nother atmosphere, which actually manifested for you as you went through your master's, as you went through your doctoral, degree program, as you started to engage in these really high profile leadership, and leaderful, capacities across so many different settings. And I think that another very important piece that you mentioned in terms of the role that the university played in just kind of really kind of propelling this lifelong learning philosophy is that, your ideas, and thank you for validating that your ideas, your being matters, that you matter, and that you do not have to have a linear story. As you were talking, I think about, the many students, the gaggle of students that are cut across all the colleges at this university for whose story is not linear. And thank you for saying that. I feel validated in my 46-year-old embodiment. Oh my gosh. Well, when I started off my undergraduate journey, that first semester, taste of freedom, you're on your own, and all the other stuff that comes along with it. Academic probation is like, oh Lord, what am my parents are gonna get me? But all of what you're sharing, you do not have to have A to B to C. Sometimes it's A to Z, and then you circling back to B to C, then that down to T. And I just again very much appreciate your willingness to be open, to be vulnerable, because it really does serve as validation, not just for myself, but for, students who are here, students who we are seeking to bring to this university, where it's just like, again, we're here to help you build that strong foundation where you are then catapulting to what is next in terms of your academic goals, your career goals, your familial goals, community goals. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to shift us into, a lot of where you are now. And you have this awesome consulting firm, right, called Community Intelligence, situated in the beautiful and historic Leimert Park. Really, a Black cultural hub is my framing, in the heartbeat of South Los Angeles. And when I think about Leimert Park, and as I was learning more about your consulting firm, Community Intelligence, the areas of concentration that you focus on, whether, me reflecting on the Crenshaw walks, or providing, you providing leadership for, LA Making Connections Network, I would imagine that you draw energy for and through your work as a result of where your organization is physically situated. I mean, if folks have not been to Leimert Park, you need to get down there. Stat. It is it's a whole experience, and there's energy filled, and it's culturally filled. And so as someone like yourself who is, deeply committed to and embedded in community promotion, well-being, including the sustainability of healthy neighborhoods, which I know is another area of focus for you. Can you tell us a little bit about your organizational model and the importance of community in your educational and life journey?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about the organization first. Community intelligence honors the wisdom of communities. And it's inspired on several levels, probably most notably by, Dr. Martin Luther King, is that everyone can be a great leader because everyone can serve. Everyone has intelligence. So by analogy, everyone has intelligence. The people in these communities, they are in many times communities that are experiencing challenges. They are often approaching those challenges with intelligence. The ways that they solve the problems make sense to them, often given the resources and circumstances with which they are faced. Given a different set of circumstances and resources, some of them might make different decisions, but it doesn't make them unintelligent sometimes to be making some of the decisions, not all decisions, but some of the decisions. And then there are people in the community who have thought deeply about the circumstances and situations of the community, but that don't often have the voice that comes along with having a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a doctorate degree or the position, or your friend ain't on the city council, or you didn't mentor the guy who became an assembly member. You know what I mean? And so you can't just call up and say, hey, yo, little, so and so, let me talk to you about this. There's people like that in the community, but that doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. In fact, some of the people who I used to pass by, this is one of the reasons why I named it community intelligence, is I would pass by this park. They would see me going through the little, where I was living at the time. It was in Pomona off 12th Street. And if anybody knows Pomona, there's two gangs over there, Cherryville and 12th Street gang, right over in that area. And I would be walking past the park. They would call me schoolboy. It was black dude living in a two Mexican gang neighborhood, but it's what I had to do to get to Cal Poly to do it. They would see me, they would call me schoolboy. And they would, after they would see me, they would talk to me about why I was going to school. Hey, schoolboy, what you going to school for? Oh man, I'm trying to help my community. I'm tired. At the time, I didn't have an articulate. There was a lot of violence going on. I remember in 1992, that was the year of the highest murder rate in Los Angeles County. That was all the year. There was so many murders that people can't even remember what the 1992 was like. It was so bad. And we had come off of several years of that bad. So I would be like, oh, I want to help reduce the violence in my community. And because many of them were gang members or ex-gang members, they would be like, man, here's what you need to do. And I would do, later on, I ended up doing some gang violence prevent. They would share with me what their ideas were. Then sometimes on the way, when I would come back past, I would talk to people, because when you live in a certain type of neighborhood, you need to know people. You know what I mean? Like, people need to know you. Hey, that's Randy. So that if something happens, you could call out somebody's name and they could say, hey, he's cool, leave him alone. You know what I mean? Like, you need that sometimes, especially if you're like me and you're walking and you ain't gang affiliated. Like, I've lived in gang neighborhoods, but I've never been gang affiliated. Never did all that. I always was able to walk through the neighborhoods, be cool with everybody, and not join that stupid stuff, because I would give people respect, but I would be like, hey, I'm not that, y'all good, but I'm not good with it. I've got to go, But their intelligence and the winos, even when I would go to the liquor store, I would stop and I would talk to the people. Sometimes they might be somebody you knew, but it didn't make them unworthy of a conversation. Or even if they were drunk and babbling, sometimes if you listen to them, there would be threads of important things. Now, later on, I didn't know I was going to name my company Community Intelligence. Now, later, when I'm a senior research scientist tasked with improving health care outcomes for home veterans who had experienced a medical condition, a mental health condition, or a social condition, meaning they just got out of jail or they were homeless, or they were psychiatric, medical, and sick and done that. I would interview them for intakes. And I didn't know that my listening skills that I had picked up on allowed me to take that, and that was my dissertation from talking to homeless veterans. That's what my dissertation ended up being. And so I was like, the intelligence of those guys have given me my doctorate. Without them, I wouldn't know Jack Dooley, whatever. I hope that's okay for the thing. I wouldn't know nothing without them. I got my PhD because of the homeless people, because they were willing to talk to me, people that were drunk, mentally ill, and sick, and just got out of jail. If they didn't talk to me, I couldn't write that up and then be Dr. Henry. So I need to respect, where did the intelligence come from? I wasn't intelligent. I didn't know crap, excuse me, before I talked to them. So who's really intelligent here? You guys are intelligent. I'm not intelligent. I didn't know anything. I was a kid who just had a question and an idea, but without you in the community, I don't know anything. So that's what community intelligence was about, is that researchers, people with PhDs, let's be humble about this stuff. God gives this to us. We don't come up with this stuff by ourselves. He puts somebody in our life that tells you about that, and at least for a person with the doctorate of public health, that's how you got your degree, bro. You didn't get that on your own. Sure, you knew the methods of doing it, but they gave you the knowledge that somebody said, "Oh, Randy, this is worthy," and that's why the Department of Defense and Veterans Administration hired me to direct the national program after they did that, because of what I had learned from homeless people that was drunk, incoherent, and whatever. Then I got hired to run a national program to improve for them. So that's where the community intelligence, that's why I was inspired to once I understood that, I was like, oh, you need to honor these folks who've given you this information that allowed you to be called a doctor, but they're the ones who taught you what you know.
That's so important, and I appreciate you also just kind of going to kind of the roots of the why. Your consulting firm is named Community Intelligence, and how it connects with all of these different facets of communities, populations, individuals, for elevating health, well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, social and communal well-being. I absolutely remember the 1990s, and definitely 1992 with the LA riots. And so as I think about, that particular context, and, going to the community, everything of what you said in terms of going to the community, honoring the community, knowing that anyone can serve, it really does help to reinforce the the criticality, the importance of community engagement, community involvement,
Yes,
community embeddedness, community partnership, as we build and grow forward, not even go forward, but grow forward
I
together.
like that.
I love everything of what you're saying. We're going to have a part 2 conversation, fairly soon. So much more to talk about, and more that I would love to, engage in conversation with you around. I know that we're coming to the end of our time together in this moment, but Dr. Henry, I would, sincerely like to thank you again for your presence, for your work, past and present, and, the time spent in connection today. It's really been an honor. And again, as someone who considers LA home place, as I lift up and take on the framing from, author activist Bell Hooks, home place is, somewhere that, nourishes our spirit to stay involved, right, in the work that we do. It's a place that, rejuvenates. So as I think about you picking up this work specific to LA, It just makes me feel so empowered. It puts a big old smile on my face because a lot of what I was experiencing, even a lot of the staples in LA when I was coming up, it was just kind of like, this is just what it is. But now when I go back home and I call LA home, it just feels so right. And, just kind of combing through a lot of the information in your books, even, Black first, I'm just like, oh my God, I was being raised in all of this culture and history and not even knowing, all this time. So without you even knowing that we'd be having this conversation on today, it's been a gift that you have given to me. I've been engaged in conversation with my family. You haven't even met them, they haven't met you, but just by extension of your work, again, it's really been a joy to not only speak with you, but to have this time with my family as we connect and reminisce and really kind of pop our collar for people who understand that frame and feel so proud about LA and the rich history it offers to not only its residents, but just to the country and to the world. So again, I just want to say thank you so much. And I'd like to also congratulate all of today's honorees. So take care, everyone.